Okay, now I can hear things. Thank God. Yo, yo. That sucks, man. I have no idea what to tell you, but that really does suck. Between dogs not eating and dogs shitting on the floor and dogs having anxiety, I don't know, brother. We love dogs, but sometimes they, need some help. Good luck, buddy. Okay. We need to work on some stuff and then probably watch a video. Probably recap Votan lore so my brain can force itself to enjoy it. Possibly. Let me fix this. Votungus lore. Coop. Yo, yo. Don't be weird, dude. Don't be weird, bro. Nice. Yeah, it is good to be back with projects. It is good to do stuff. It's a very fulfilling life when you get stuff done, you know? Do I really? Damn. I'm looking filthier day by day. Filthier day by day. Well, if there's anything to de-age you, it's certainly doing this and not fucking playing League. I'll tell you that much. Yo, 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 yo. So we're gonna be here for a little bit, and I think we're gonna watch, a lore video. Even though I know kind of what the Leagues of Votan are already about, I just want to... I want to get a refresher on their lore. And, to somehow find some sort of redeeming quality of these disgusting clones. So that's the goal for today. Watch a video, chill the fuck out. Maybe cook up a conversion for the Votan stuff, or ideas for, like, enjoying that army. And then clean this fucking thing. And I think that's it for today. And at that point, I think it'd be a little bit too late and we go to bed. Because right now it's what? It's about 9 p.m. right now. I could stream for about 3 hours. And then we call it a day. And we're good. We are Gucci. The never-ending trudge of cleaning things. Hang on. You know, I really don't like wireless headsets. I have a wireless headset and a wired headset, and the wireless ones are always so much shittier. It's just more so convenient. They don't sound good. And it's the exact same brand. It's like the HyperX wireless something something. It's the same headset as the one I have on right now, except this is wired. And I don't think I like the wireless ones. No, I didn't. Like, convenience is fine if you don't really care about music, but if you really love music and you want to hear it properly, you just cannot use wireless. Any recommendations for people who want to start crafting my own miniatures? You want to sculpt your own miniatures? I mean, if you want to make your own stuff, you'd probably want to go 3D printing, so like digital sculpting. There's like infinite possibilities with that. If you're talking about making your own minis in Warhammer, that's a bit different, but all the stuff I've seen with people making their own stuff and selling it, it all comes from Patreons. Patreon seems to be the best place. It's just you need to be able to, like, sculpt shit and then get it out there, you know? But mostly Patreon. Be a good digital sculptor and release STLs on Patreon, or if you got 3D prints, you know, available, you can kind of sell those too. But yeah, that's what I've seen. Or you go traditional and it's like a massive process, which is certainly not for everyone. Yo, yo. Yo, yo. God, don't we love working with metal minis? Oh, these are metal. This is an old Games Workshop staff gift from 2002 or 2004. GW used to do a lot of like larger scaled things. Like one of their biggest ones was Inquisitor. Like they had some pretty large metal minis that were kind of like, I think the game itself was more of a, I don't even know how to explain it without looking at something. But it was certainly not like a legitimate war game. Maybe something like Roleplay or Kill Team, but even smaller than Kill Team, I think it was. It's not going to be this weekend, I realized. We have guests this weekend, so it'll be next weekend. I was notified that we have people coming over, so there's no way I can do it. So we're just going to stream. Which, you know, unfortunate, but we'll just do a regular stream on both channels. Yeah. I forgot. I actually completely forgot people were coming over, so I'd rather not do it, you know, when they're sleeping. Because when I play these games, I want to play them for as long as I can. So, like, maybe I can play something shorter instead of Dead Space. That would be ideal. You know, like a one-off, maybe like 1 hour game, 2 hour game, something like that. That'd be good. I'd rather save Dead Space for like a Saturday and Sunday. Or I can no-life it on a Saturday. Or a Sunday. Something along those lines. It'd be very interesting. You can finish the Dead Space remake in 1 day, really? I'd have to start at like 7 a.m. and just go until 7 p.m. Or like 9 or something. Seriously? Look at troll ass, bro. Oh, the booty. Troll booty. 10-hour game time? What difficulty, though? Was it like a legitimate difficulty or just kind of like journalist mode? Second to hardest one? Okay. I mean, maybe then this Saturday if I start... Because the thing is, I want to start at night. Which I guess doesn't really make sense for Dead Space, because you can't finish a whole game at night if you have to go to bed. Yeah, maybe I could do that. Maybe this Saturday I can beat Dead Space in one day. One single day. We'll start in the morning, and then we'll finish it same day. Maybe that's a feasible thing. No, I know it's really good. I played the original. The original was amazing. And the remake is obviously really good. I would still say, though, of all the games I've played recently, the Stasis Bone Totem was the coolest. Stasis Bone Totem not only had amazing voice acting, but they actually had characters you cared about. Whereas, like, in Still Wakes the Deep, the voice acting's amazing, but I don't give a fuck about the characters. Like, Roy was cool. He was a chill dude. Like, the guy who has his insulin problem. Or he's got diabetes. Waifu, yo, buddy. Yeah, it's very, like, maybe I just don't play enough games, but, like, having characters you give a shit about and then seeing them die in a game, it's like, damn, bro, that hurts. Especially the way they go out. Like, fucking Dom in Gears of War was pretty bad. And a few others. But that's, like, when you absolutely know they're going to die and they're not coming back. Because God knows some games just bring them back no matter what, which just ruins it. Yeah, 2 is good. 2 is definitely insane. I started with 1, and I still prefer 1, but 2 is definitely not a bad game in the slightest. Definitely a really, really good entry. But 3 is garbage. Like, Dead Space 3 is complete trash. It's fun co-op with, like, a buddy, but that's about it. Can't tell if these are supposed to be here. I mean, I was going through my old 360 games recently, and my PC games. I went through my fucking Dawn of War DLCs, like Dark Crusade, Soulstorm. I had the original Dawn of War, Winter Assault DLC. I was going through the first Gears of War that I had for 360, the second one, the third one. I had, like, Blood Bowl. I had a bunch of weird shit. Yeah. But the new Gears game is going to be really sick. It looks like kind of a return to form. You know, instead of this, like, oh, the next generation of kids stuff that everyone does. It's the prequel to, like, everything, which is excellent, because this is going to be what everyone's wanted. Dom, Marcus, like, the gang back together, but in the past. Give me one sec. Just not. There you go. One sec. Okay. Three was just kind of a fun game with a friend, but it wasn't a good game, I guess. Compared to 1 and 2, it just didn't even hold up. We're good. We're chilling. We're cleaning up metal minis, because that's what we do here, apparently. And I need to put on a Leagues of Votan video. I'm going to force myself to like that faction. I will force myself to like the Leagues of Votan. Or I'll die trying. The lovely Leagues of Votan. Oh, no, 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 no. Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming they had other shit going on, so they just kind of just wanted them out, you know? But the lore that they have is cool. It's just, I don't think I like it. It's not poorly done, it's just not my flavor. Like, a book would have been nice to go along with them. Like, for God's sake, it's a brand new faction. Why can't we have a book? If you really want people to get interested in what you're putting out, you kind of have to give them a bit of lore to work with outside of the main book. Like a story or something that can kind of, like, get them in the mood. They're fun to play, but they get stale. Yeah, I mean, I'm more so interested in just, like, making cool things. I have a general idea of kind of maybe how I want to do them, but it really boils down to liking their aesthetic, and if I don't like their aesthetic, I'm not going to do them. And right now, their aesthetic does not sing to me. So I think what I would do is probably bash... maybe, maybe try to bash, like, Caradron. I think that makes the most sense. The Caradron Overlords very much have that, like, futuristic vibe to them. And it looks good, so... yeah, I mean, I don't really keep up with 40k, so I have no fucking clue, but, like, give them something. Literally give them anything. Like, GW loves books. They love lore. They love creating things that, you know, everyone can kind of enjoy and be a bigger fan of. Pretty sure they're supposed to be slated for, like, a second release anyways. Like, they need a few units to fill in their roster, because, like, right now I think their latest unit was, what? Pioneers on foot with, like, shotguns or something, which is cool. I think it's shotguns. What do the new units have from the Kill Team box? The Jaegers. The Hernken Jaegers. Felix Jaeger. Because I think those guys are kind of a step in the right direction, but they're still lacking. They're lacking a little bit. What the fuck is that? Yo, yo. It's good. We're chilling. It is good for now. It's almost the weekend. Everyone loves the fucking weekend. Dude, what even is this? This guy's mohawk is pretty small. That's not very big. Yeah, a lot of these used to be in metal. They do a lot of metal. At least, they used to do a lot of metal. Right now, I think they're still doing it for, like, a throwback, nostalgic, you know, go chew on some fucking lead type of deal. It's not in lead. But yeah. These are in metal. It's just because metal is easier to produce smaller quantities of things, because, like, if you're tooling up something to do in plastic, it's implying you're going to be selling a lot, because that shit is very expensive. Whereas, like, initially you'd sculpt this in, like, green stuff or something, and then you would cast it up, and you'd just pour, you know, miniature after miniature, one by one by one by one, whatever it may be. Super cheap compared to what you would do typically with, you know, the plastics up here. So Yeah. Metal stuff is just easier to produce. Cheaper. And if you've got weird one-off things like this, where this was like a staff gift to Games Workshop employees, you know, you're not really going to be making it in plastic, are you? Because, like, that shit is free. It's not even paid for. It's not even paid for. Yeah, this guy's got a small mohawk. Super small mohawk. Yeah. These days, it's clearly, you know, nobody uses lead for this shit anymore, thank God. But either way, you're going to be washing your hands. Lead D&D dice? I don't know about using no lead D&D dice. The weight is nice, but the cleanup is disgusting, and I don't like it, but some things were only made in metal, and so you have to appreciate them for that, right? Some things that were actually made in metal are being reproduced in resin. Now, you glue these. You can glue them, you can pin them. Yeah, you can do a bunch of stuff with them. Metal minis typically have, they've got, like, the cooler sculpts, usually. The older, more, like, hand-sculpted things, right? All the newer stuff is digital, and it's not that the digital stuff looks bad, because it just doesn't. But there is a certain charm to, like, hand-sculpted minis, you know, that you can't really get anymore. There is certainly a charm. Ow. Yeah, you really need to kind of, like, let them sit for a bit. You can't glue them and then be like, oh, I'm gonna move them. It's like, no, you leave them for a fucking day. Or you've got, like, activators and baking soda and all that shit, but I wouldn't really use it, to be honest, personally. When I was gluing metal minis, it was Faith and super glue. And I was an idiot. Because the worst thing I've ever tried to put together with metal, like as a metal miniature, was the, it was the old Orc Dreadnought. Like a now Def Dread. I think they just called it a Kilocan or something at that time. Holy fucking nightmare. When you're a kid and you don't know how to pin things, and you're impatient, putting together a metal mini that literally has arms, like, if you've seen a Def Dread, their arms are like, if this is the body, their arms go out, and they just go like this. Right? So when you slot them in, it's a flat surface to a flat surface, and you literally have to put, like, a paint pot under it. You have to hold it in place. You know, again, I'm a kid. I don't know how to fucking pin things or drill things. Like, that thing was horrible to put together. Holy nightmare. But it was cool. It was memorable. You know, one-off little, like, fantasy miniatures are way easier to put together because they've got, like, 3 pieces. And they're not very heavy. Well, the new ones are called Def Dreads. I think a long time ago they called them Dreadnoughts. Or even just straight-up Killicans. They had a lot of, like, weird similarities with names. Alright, well, this is mostly okay for now. Fucking massive dwarf slayer. With, like, very bizarre axes. There's, like, no detail on them. Cool. Alright. This can go over here. That's good enough for now. Go put it on the shelf later. Try and, like, fix it up a bit more. Glue it together, though. Another one down. Thank God. Well, maybe in his past life, because now he's just wanting to die. Maybe in his past life. I need, my vacuum is broken. Well, my vacuum isn't broken, it only works if, it's plugged in. This is the weirdest piece of shit thing ever. It won't go on, but when I turn it, sorry, not turn it, when I plug it in with the USB, when I plug it in with the USB and I flip this, you can hear it. It's not very powerful, but it works. I don't know why it's not working when it's supposedly charged, but at least it works. No, I'm not doing that. I got a dog, and I'm 30. Almost. I am almost 30 with a dog. I don't think I want him eating anything or even in this room. Okay, let me just go wash my hands real quick. I will be right back. And then we'll put on the Leagues of Votan video. The Leagues of Votan. I hope I care about them. Hope I do. Ow! Mochi! Ow! Stop! Stop it! Alright. Leagues of Votan time. How can I care about this faction when they're all fucking genetic clones and they have nothing to live for? How can I care about the Leagues of Votan? What was that? Ivana? Was that you? I don't know, I heard something fall. What? Am I fucking like Delulu? The fuck did I just hear? Hang on. Run, baby Moch, run! Run, Mochi, run! You little booger ass, run! Alright. What, the Votan Book of Grudges? It's just hard to care about something that isn't, like... It's not real, it's a clone. Clones just, like, have no value because you could just clone more. Their life is forfeit. At least guardsmen are actual people. All clones having a book of grudges. I mean, they're just like... I mean, grudges are very much a dwarf thing for sure. Let me do this. I don't know. I have no fucking clue. Okay. I'm going to put on a Leagues of Votann lore video in the background while I work on Iron Drakes. I'm going to recap, or rather refresh my mind with what they are. And we're going to go from there. Yeah, that's Mochi. He's a booger. He's a little booger. When I step over the gate to go into the living room, he's just waiting there for me. He's attacking me. Okay. Let's put on Westhammer, I guess? I don't need to know. No, this is just like literally the general... This is like the lore of the Votann. The Leagues of Votann. I'm getting a refresher, bro. Last time I read anything Votann was when the Codex came out, and that was, what, 2 years ago, I think?
What happens when you...
Oh my god, what happens when you skip the fucking ad? Yeah, this is just straight up the Leagues of Votann lore. Okay, let's window capture. And let's see where this goes. This is going to be some, like... I don't even know what to call it. Hang on. This stream will be called... Forcing... myself to love... the Leagues of Votann. I gotta force myself to like this shit. Alright, let's see.
Out of all the sentient species within the grimdark future of the 42nd millennia, few are known to be as courageous, determined,
I don't know, man.
and utterly ruthless as the kin of the Leagues of Votann. To stand against them in battle is to...
I mean, I will be doing it. I will be making my own gist of it. It's just a matter of the general lore of it, and maybe working out how to make the minis cool. Like, it's 40k, and uniformity is like everything. So, that makes sense from, like, an army visual standpoint, where everyone looks very clean and organized, and, you know, all their guns are the same. That makes sense. But we'll see.
Is to face an armored avalanche that destroys everything in its path. It is to be appraised through a calculated system
that's cool.
of
Yeah.
risk and reward. And inevitably
I still
be
want
found
something
wanting.
rooted in,
all of
like,
their pursuits,
possibility.
the kin are unrelenting. Whether
But
they take the form of Hearthkin exploratory
just somewhat
fleets
different.
that plumb the dark depths of the stars, charting new
All
trade
different
routes
colors.
and marking planets for future acquisition.
I
the
mean,
awe-inspiring feats of
you could do
engineering and
something with that,
scientific
I'm not
achievement
sure.
by the Brockir Forge Masters, or the resource harvesting operations of the Chthonian mining guilds that use seemingly supernatural technology to topple mountain ranges, shatter entire worlds, and even drain the life from the stars themselves. The kin are a proud yet stubborn people, known for their inhuman...
One of the biggest things for me and the Leagues of Votann is that, again, they're all clones, but they're clones from, like, different genetics. And within those genetics, they can kind of be born to be good at something, like harder skin, they're more agile, you know, better vision. They're basically fucking, like, mutants, bro. They're born with, like, genetic enhancements. They're mutants. That's what they are. If a fantasy dwarf met this thing would be in the book. This thing would be killed on sight. They're ugly as hell. But it's 40k. That's okay.
Human level of calculated patience. Every action they take is premeditated to a ridiculous scale. They see no resource, including the lives of their kin, as expendable, and would seek to establish alliances before declaring war. They are slow to anger.
You do
but when
have to
their
kind of
pride
just
has
make
been
your own
wounded
shit up at this
or a
point,
great
yeah.
insult suffered, the dam of reason breaks. A grudge is declared, and the tidal wave of kin fury is unleashed.
Yeah.
All reason is
But I
cast
mean,
aside, and the
taking dwarvish greed and like 40k-ifying it, where like they will literally go destroy planets and harvest fucking moons and everything. Like, that's very dwarvish. It's very 40k. We're just gonna keep watching. I don't know. I need my headcanon to make sense for me to enjoy this, but I still like aspects of their lore for sure. Yeah, the scale of it, exactly. The scale of 40k is just infinitely bigger than fantasy. Fantasy is a world. It's one world. 40k, how many worlds are there? How many planets? A planet could get fucking blipped out of existence and nobody would care in 40k. In fantasy, it's like, if the world's gone, yikes, we're dead, which it did go. Yeah, we'll just keep watching.
The pursuit of vengeance at any cost. Oath-bound warriors roused to war by the chanting of battle songs and oaths bellowed in the ancestors' name. They will fight to the bitter end, the only acceptable outcome being the complete eradication of their hated foe. The roaring fire of kin anger only extinguished by the blood of their enemies. A grudge settled.
The saddest thing I think I've ever seen... Bro, only the Grimnir. Only the, like... They're not really a wizard, like, more so, I guess, a priest, I think it was. They use the warp differently. He's the only one with a beard. Like, fuck, I got the Votan beard going on right now. If this shit was on a dwarf, you take the oath, you're dead.
And one wrong righted. The sun is blotted out by the immensity of their void ships, from which rain down an orbital bombardment of military landers and dropships that ferry the kin hosts to war. Armored spearheads of land fortresses, decorated with the proud insignia of their honored leagues, slam through obstacles and fortifications,
that's a mini?
while enemy fire
That looks
glances
way too
harmlessly
clean.
off their plated hulls. Scouting vehicles race alongside them, swinging around flanks, bringing heavy weapons to bear for pinpoint accurate strikes that strip the enemy of all their defenses. Teleport beacons flare and hatches slam open as the kin host infantry surge forth into the fray, laying down a storm of fire that tears their enemies' ranks apart.
They really do just look like Terran Marines. Would have just made it like Necrons, and maybe made them like an ancient enemy of the Necrons, and then have them like mountain strongholds, kind of like Crypt Worlds, and they just have been sleeping. I don't know. I mean, that would be cool. That'd be a take on like the whole fantasy thing, I suppose, a little bit. But like, orcs and Tyranids as like ancestral enemies, and Eldar for whatever reason. I mean, you know, with the enmity between dwarves and elves in like every setting. They do work with the Imperium. Well, no. Pretty sure they don't even want to be near the Imperium, because if the Imperium knows that these guys have like the STCs, the old like schematics to Dark Age technology that was like eradicated because it was sentient, and they had this whole uprising and thing, if they knew that they had that, they would just go kill them all. Like, they would try to. I mean, the Votan stuff's pretty intense, but I don't think they ever want to be near the Imperium. Like, the only Votan who are working anywhere near Imperial, like, places, or, like, are kind of, like, assimilated into society and whatnot, are the squats on Necromunda. And pretty sure even then they kind of, like, stick to themselves, you know? And they've been so far gone from, like, the actual Votan that I'm sure they're not even aware of what's going on. Like, they branched out ages ago. Okay, yeah, true, we'll keep watching.
Their armor proving as useful as wet paper against the superior technology of the kin's esoteric firearm.
Look at his head. I don't want to sound like a grumpy fucking loser, because I'm not. I love dwarves. And I know this is 40k, but, like, look at his head! What is his head? You know what his head has in common with? A fucking stone troll. A decrepit, dirty creature from the old world. He's a stone troll. Dwarves don't like trolls.
Searing beams of energy burrow through fortifications and detonate enemy vehicles as the Hearthkin advances like a relentless tide of armored fury.
He is a mutant.
Bellowing battle cries as they bring death to their foes. Wave upon wave of kinetic rounds and blasts of searing plasma energy pulp any enemy foolish enough to stand against them into vaporized clouds of red mist, while missiles rain down on enemy fortifications and concentrated graviton blasts crush entire enemy squads into singularities of gore. Heavily armored Hearthguard and Chthonian Berserkers storm forward to obliterate any remaining foes in close combat, cracking skulls and cleaving hordes of enemies in twain with their massive power axes. By the time the fighting is done, nothing remains, except for whatever prize the kin had come to claim, and the smoldering wrecks of destroyed vehicles and fields of dismembered bodies of all those that sought to stand in their way. To those they call friend, the kin are seen as invaluable allies, a rugged race of engineers, aided by their artificial intelligence, and war machines capable of harnessing some of the most advanced machinery not seen since the dark age of technology. But to those the kin deem a threat, to all those that would harm their people or stand between them and their acquisitions, the kin eradicate with the same relentless determination they use when blasting apart earth and stone. The Leagues of Votan are a massive stellar empire of battle-hardened abhuman clones.
See, that's the interesting thing, too. In 40K, dwarves are thriving. These guys are not on the losing side. They're not like the underdogs, you know? So it's very interesting, again, to like... It's different from fantasy. I hate comparing fantasy to 40K because it's just not the same. It's just more so when you have a dwarf in a setting and you're so used to like the typical... you know, dying race, like, they're master craftsmen, they've got the beards, they hold up their honor, and, you know, they're very, angry at everything. I'm pretty sure in most settings, dwarves aren't thriving. Like, and I suppose that's some of their appeal, in a way, kind of like, you put more stock in them, you want them to do well, because they're just not doing well. So it's interesting how the Leagues of Votan... Pretty sure even way back when they did the squats, I don't think the squats were like turbo vast. They kind of had, I think, like one or two planets or something. But these guys are like, they're pumped out of a pooper. Like, these dudes are cloned and, oh, here you go, new batch, ready for the grinder.
Galaxy's core.
It's interesting.
Formed and led by the wisdom of
There's a lot
ancient
of them.
AIs that have guided their people for generations. For a time, they were keen on keeping to their own affairs, leaving the core only to explore uncharted space, or, on occasion, work as mercenaries in the wars of far-off xeno-species, in order to gain an insight into the wider universe. However, the opening of the Great Rift sent chaotic ripples through the universe, causing their expeditions to ever more frequently come into contact with the other races of the galaxy, and the hellish abominations that attempt to claw their way into our reality. As the universe descends into chaos, and the drums of war echo once more, the homeworlds of the kin are now facing an existential threat, one in which they will not suffer to go unanswered. The other races of the galaxy have a choice to make, to stand with the kin as a valued ally and trusted
dwarves aren't
friend,
very progressive.
or against them as a hated rival.
They don't
To the
like
kin,
moving
it makes
along.
no difference. The choice
They
is
don't like
merely an
advancing
illusion,
many things.
as the stubborn and often hard-headed kindred will allow nothing to stand between them and
Well, it's just because the dwarves are always very good at what they did.
Are they given form?
Like, when it comes to the dwarves are very elite. They've always been extremely good at what they've done, but they don't seem to kind of better themselves in a way. It's almost like clockwork, you know? Like, you can get better at a craft, but, like, actually turning that craft into something more is pretty rare, at least in fantasy, because that's where, like, you've got Malachi, and you've got all the fucking, like, the outcasts from, like, the Engineers Guild and everything, where innovation is kind of looked down upon because it's spitting on what came before you. Not entirely sure how the Votan take it. Like, I believe they just have old technology and they kind of just revere that as well, right? Like, it's their most prized thing. So very much fantasy in that way, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, they're just good at what they do, and, you know, they're a dying race just because, at least not in fantasy, not in 40K they're a dying race, but in fantasy it was more so problem after problem, you know? You have the Golden Age and everything's great, and then a giant catastrophe, and oh, we won, but at what cost? We're all fucked. And then another catastrophe, and another one, and another one. They just could never catch a break, and that's kind of why they've always been on the decline, right? Like, how do you recover from so many constant L's? It's like Gangplank. Dwarves in fantasy are just Gangplank. They had everything. It all went to shit, and then after that, they're like, we're gonna reclaim the holds, or I'm gonna reclaim Bilgewater. No, you're not. Like, it's just gonna get worse.
and strength, by the molten fires and pounding pistons of
Yeah,
the forge.
I mean, again,
Are
it's
they
40K,
armed
it's
and
different.
armored? By the
I don't want to
Votan
keep
and by the
comparing
Fade,
fantasy to
are they
40K.
given
That's so
wisdom
stupid.
and purpose? And by the searing wrath of the hearth, are they filled with a fury to overcome any foe? Let's take a deeper look at the Leagues of Votan. But before we get into all that, I want to take a minute to tell you about Factor.
Factor's legit. I want a sponsorship with Factor. Except they only ship to the US, and I'm Canadian.
The history of the Leagues of Votan is an enigma wrapped in a mystery, and if any records do in fact exist from their earliest days before settling the galactic core, they are most certainly buried deep within the remaining ancestor cores, entombed beneath thousands of years of additional information, and are unfortunately most likely unrecoverable.
No,
Due
I
to
play
the sheer
tabletop.
overwhelming
I haven't
abundance
recently,
of
but
seemingly
I've
allegorical
played a bunch of like
information
40K and Age of
contradictory
Sigmar
statements.
lately.
The traditionally thorough and pragmatic kin have come to accept the fact that much of their established ancient history has blurred into the realm of myth and legend. This, admittedly, isn't that big of a deal to them. They aren't like the humans of the Imperium that shield themselves against the galaxy through their armor of faith. They look at it in very realistic and practical terms. To them, reality is what they make of it. Is there ancient wisdom buried deep in the proverbial halls of legend that may be worth knowing about? Undoubtedly, yes. But unless the matters of their ancient past suddenly become relevant to their present, they aren't too bothered by their lack of insight. This isn't to say that they don't dedicate some of the brightest minds to probing the depths of the ancestor cores in hopes of potentially asking the right sequence of questions in order to gain but a glimpse into their ancient past. But this is done more so out of curiosity rather than some existential need to understand their place in the universe. The kin know exactly who and what they are, and nothing will change that. That being said, there are several undeniable truths that we can pull from the myriad menagerie of myths and legends that make up their origin story. These are what the kin refer to as the first truths, indisputable facts of the—
Is that Bill Burr? Or as Bill Burr is a squat. Make a dwarf gangplank skin. I mean, they made pirate dwarves. That's Bill Burr, bro. Yeah. Stream has got me to learn the tabletop, but I've just been playing Combat Patrol. That's cool. I mean, it's a good place to start. It's better than buying a 2,000 point army and just going crazy, right? Start small, work up from that.
of their existence.
Dad, where does the sun go at night?
Subaru.
Explore.
The first of these first truths is that their most ancient of ancestors departed their original homeworld in a mass fleet of generational ships bound for the uncharted sections of space near the galactic core. This homeworld, although not directly stated to be so, was almost certainly Terra, due to the kin sharing a plethora of genetic markers with humanity. This means that the kin at their core are human beings, albeit a form of abhuman, even though
I can accept that they're abhumans because it's very 40k. Any sort of like offshoot of humanity, whereas in fantasy was like an actual living, breathing creature. Ogryn are like the space ogres, but they're an offshoot of humanity. The Ratlings are the space hobbits, but they're, you know, an offshoot of humanity. Like, humans were just kind of stunted and twisted into just what their environment made of them, right? And that makes sense, and I actually don't even mind that. So I don't even mind them not being like a living, breathing, original form of a dwarf, but more so created by their environment, you know? I've always kind of accepted that, so that's not really a problem. I gotta finish painting and building my Dark Angels Combat Patrol. Go for it, man. Go for it. About the first book? Which first book? I mean, the books are cool to read. You can find them online somewhere probably, but like if you want to own them and like smell them, because smelling them is good. That's what we kind of do here. Yeah. Horus Rising. Oh, you're talking about the Horus Heresy stuff? Ranged in his... Yo, Ratlings are gross, bro. They all inbreed and they're vile and they shit themselves and they're just gross. Like how hobbits are in fantasy, you know, cheerful little like happy-go-lucky creatures who just want to live in some fucking like off the beaten path little hole. The ones in 40k are disgusting. Like they're the exact opposite. They stink. They smell like they're just nasty. They're gross little creatures. Like the Ogryn are obviously more you know, friendlier and docile. Like, they don't really do much, and they're kind of just big babies. But yeah, the Ratlings are not fun.
Even though the Imperium and many zealous Inquisitors often label them as Xenos abominations. Ironically, even Games Workshop themselves list them as a Xenos species on their website when in reference to the Warhammer 40,000 tabletop game. The second of these first truths is that even from the beginning, the Kin were a people made entirely of clones. And their eternal allies, the Iron Kin,
terrible!
they were artificial constructs that
like,
live
cool,
and
it
work beside
works.
them, and who the Kin view as equals, have also been with them since the beginning. The final part of these first truths is that members of these generational ships were without a doubt miners and prospectors that had been sent into the heavens to dredge the riches of uncharted stars. Unfortunately, this is where myths and legends start to complicate things, as it's not yet been determined why after reaching the galactic core, the Kin did not return to their homeworld with the wealth of the galaxy in tow. Instead, they chose to settle these worlds and remain isolated. Now, considering that the majority of their
That
ships
literally
all
just
descended
sounds very
into the core
dwarvish.
within
Dwarves don't really want to, like, involve themselves in anything. When things are going bad, unless it's involving them, they don't care. That's kind of one of their biggest problems, because the world could be falling apart around them, and they would just be stuck digging and mining and literally licking their gold in their holds, doing nothing. Which is where, like, Thorgrim Grudgebearer and, you know, the Age of Reckoning for Warhammer Fantasy and, you know, Retake the Realms came from. But, like, I mean, yeah, okay, that's cool.
than a single Terran century.
Used to watch your GP stuff? Hey, yeah, well, we're here almost every day on this
putting
channel.
on my tinfoil hat and doing a little bit of speculating.
Usually.
So take this with a grain of salt. But I personally believe that the early ancestors of the Kin saw what was happening during the end of the Dark Age of technology and sought refuge within the galactic core, as this was an area that was not readily inhabitable by humanity or other species. The artificial intelligences that they had taken alongside them had not rebelled like the men of iron of this time, and due to their lack of psychically gifted individuals, the Kin would have not been susceptible to the Psyker Plague that was currently rampaging through the galaxy. I'm pretty confident that the early ancestors were seeking refuge within the core, a place that only they could inhabit, while the rest of the galaxy burned around them. Let's talk a little bit more about
That's
the
what
fact that
dwarves
all
do.
of the Kin are actually clones.
They're not
Now,
cowards, but,
clones
like,
in the
that's what they do.
traditional sense,
Okay.
where they all end up looking like
This is the cloning aspect of them, which, again, is probably my biggest... My one thing I don't necessarily like about them.
while the rest of the galaxy burned around them. Let's talk a little bit more about the fact that all of the Kin are actually clones.
I wish they would give us more of these. I don't know what the fuck that is. This guy's probably in some vehicle. But these are very reminiscent of the Rogue Trader squads. These almost look like pilots. In a way, their helmets are literally the exact same, if not slightly different because of their visor. To, these guys. These dudes. So their little visor helmets right there. You know, they're missing, like, the little nub on top, but basically same. It's cool.
Now, they're not clones in the
This guy got oatmeal for a head.
traditional sense, where they all end up looking like the exact
That's
same
Big Mama.
person. More so, they are clones created from a mismatch of hundreds, if not thousands, of different genomes, biological archetypes, and stable mutations. The result...
This one is cool. This guy up here, this, like, what are they called? A call? I think they're a call. This is very reminiscent of the fucking, like, 8th edition Dwarf army book Thane on the front. He's got, like, a giant pelt over his back, and the color palette looks very similar. I think that's kind of where they got inspired to draw this one from. But that's, yeah, stuff like this is cool, you know? Mr. Lumpyhead, that's just an abomination.
is the creation of unique individuals that all have certain adaptations that make them better at performing pretty much any given role in their society. All of these different adaptations are what are collectively referred to as clone skeins, and the genetic pool that the skeins are pulled from is believed to have been originally developed by their first ancestors. It's theorized that the use of such biological augmentation would produce a society perfectly suited to living in pretty much any conditions. And surprisingly, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that this practice was pretty common in the Dark Age of technology, especially when it came to the pioneering colony fleets that were sent out into the galaxy in order to colonize distant worlds. For example, the original people that would end up colonizing the Space Wolves' homeworld of Fenris were said to have been genetically augmented with the DNA of wolves in order to aid in their survival efforts upon the frozen death world. So it stands to reason that the people sent towards the galactic core would have been capable of similar augmentations. And since the core would have a lot more hazardous conditions than simply being too cold, it also stands to reason that they would have access to a lot more different skeins. Although all of the kin are unique individuals, they do have some similarities. They are short, stocky, and hardy, and have far denser muscle and bone systems than baseline humans. They're also noted as having a higher red and white blood cell count. Now, many of them are gifted with formidable strength and resilience, while other kin may be forged with clone skeins that impart enhanced reaction time, infrared vision, or even resistance to extreme temperatures, gravity, and radiation. The use of cloning has also had a subtle secondary effect of diminishing their connection to the warp, and thus they have no uncontrolled psyker mutation found anywhere within their society. Now, that's not to say they don't have psychers, because they definitely do. Only a very select few are created with a rare psychoactive clone skein that allows the kin in question to interface with what they refer to as barrier tech. Through these devices, the kin is able to pierce the veil between universes and directly manipulate the warp, making them into something of a pseudo-psyker. These individuals are known as the Grimnir, and they resemble something more akin to a priest than a sorcerer. The combination of their diminished souls and warding tech make it next to impossible for them to become the victim of chaotic mutation or demonic possession. It is the Grimnir who are given the extreme honor of directly interfacing with the Votan in order to ask them questions.
The Votan are a really cool idea,
wisdom.
though.
There is an enormous pool of different skeins that can be.
The whole clone thing is Garbaggio lore. It's very 40k. I don't think it's garbage. I just think it's subjectively not my favorite. I don't think it's garbage at all. It's very 40k, very futuristic. If you want to thrive as a species, I'm sorry, but you don't have enough people having sex to do so in a world where everyone's fucking dying en masse, right? Like, you got people eating other people to live, like corpse starch and everything. I don't think you make more people. Like, if there was some way to just work out that, like, you know, they weren't clones and from the earlier people that had gone out to colonize, like, the galactic core, that they were somehow able to reproduce and thrive as a species, cool, but, like, how would that work? How would you colonize the galactic core if you made babies that were people, which are not suited for that environment, like high gravity? We are Honey, I Shrunk the Humans in the Center of the Galaxy piece. I mean, I just don't know how else you do it. And I mean, if you've got dwarves in, like, a futuristic setting, they would really push everything to the extreme. They wouldn't really be, like, entirely stuck with their religion, I suppose. Like, the whole Votan thing kind of guiding them and teaching them about, like, you know, what came before them and whatnot. Cool. But they're still a very practical, like, let's get shit done type of deal, and they're very smart at doing so. Genetically be better. Oh, I don't know. I guess we'll keep listening. I need a refresher, so I'm down.
Be pulled from to create kin perfectly suitable to just about any role that can be found throughout their society. And it's not uncommon for kin to be created with a whole host of these different mutations, most of which physically manifest in some form or another, whether that be through unusually colored eyes, or craggy subdermal skin layers, chemical body odors, or various other telltale signs of their abilities. Each of these physical manifestations are worn as a badge of honor and are highly valued within their society. Whereas over in the Imperium, such mutation would be viewed with fear, ridicule, and extreme prejudice.
It should
the
be!
kin recognize the value of all of these different traits, and thus every member of their society that displays them. The clones themselves are created in what is known as a
Bro.
value of all of these different traits.
It's very 40k. It's very 40k. She got the Trick 2G going on with that hairline. Holy moly! Bertha, put on that helmet! Put that helmet back on. Get back to war. Making them an ally of the Imperium? What do you mean rude? I mean, you know, he knows I'm joking. He can hear me. Pretty sure there's so many different, well, as what was just said, I believe it was what? There's so many different clone skins to pick from, and you're just birthed with some genetic, like, sequence of them, and it just makes you kind of good at something, and then that's your job, you know? At birth, you're assigned something, like the coal mines, or, you know, go work the timber mill. I don't know. I mean, there's no wood on these planets for sure, but, like, you know. Or maybe there is. Are you going to give Gene Stealer cults a Goliath rock grinder, but the Votan get their Fortnite battle bus? I mean, it's just, I don't know. Hey, I'm going to keep listening.
And thus every
Maybe. What did he say about that?
whole host of these different mutations, most of which physically manifest in some form or another, whether that be through unusually colored eyes, or craggy subdermal skin layers,
something like that,
chemical
maybe,
body
yeah.
odors, or various other telltale signs of their abilities. Each of these physical manifestations are worn as a badge of honor and are highly valued within their society. Whereas over in the Imperium, a such mutation would be viewed with fear, ridicule, and extreme prejudice. The kin recognize the value of all of these different traits, and thus every member of their society that displays them. The clones themselves are created in what is known as a crucible. You can think of these like a sacred area full of different cloning technologies. Now, each of the kindred have a crucible of their own, and all members of their kindred are birthed from the same pods. This makes them extremely important to a kindred, as it's where new life within their family originates, and thus they are ruthlessly defended by
Worship
oath-sworn
the
warriors
pod.
known as the Imbir.
What is this shit, bro?
The artificial intelligence known as the Ironkin, on the other hand, are each created by the Votan themselves, and are fully functioning mechanical intellects in their own right. Each and every one of them is an incredibly advanced system that is able to mimic kin social behaviors, making them, mentally at least, almost indistinguishable from their flesh and blood brothers and sisters. They consist of a cerebral unit and a mechanical body. Now, the body can take multiple different forms and is designed to fill one of a variety of different roles within.
I quite like the Ironkin, more so than the actual, like, kin themselves. You'd almost think there was some sort of nefarious thing going on, though, with the robots, right? If they're made from this, like, giant memory bank. Never know. If they didn't look like crumpled mash, then they'd be cool. I mean, it's just... they're just gonna gotcha spawns, and it's like we did a good roll on this spawn. Like, hey guys, we got the new batch of coal miners. Like, I love my ancestors. Shut the fuck up, get to the mines, you lumpy-headed weirdo. Go. Your ancestors love you. See you in 30 years. Like, yeah, it's... I mean... I don't know, it's just... That's... I don't know, it's hard to like these guys. It's so hard to like the Votan, solely from a lore point of view. Aesthetically, I think they're great, mostly. But why do I care more about the Imperium of Man than the Votan? And they're dwarves, you know what I mean? But they're written a certain way. I'm not gonna, like, you know... Yeah, go to the coal mines, do something. You guys smell like shit? Alright, you're frontlining. Fucking block out all their scents. I don't know, man. It's just like... It's such a different take on dwarves that it's hard to resonate with my brain. Because when you're so used to, like, the very typical bearded, short, beer-loving, family-loving, honor-loving, grudge-loving, fucking Elgie-hating individual, and then you go to this stuff, it's very jarring. And I'm just gonna keep saying, I know it's 40k, you can't compare it to fantasy, but it's a very drastically different take on dwarves. Like, there's a lot of similarities for sure, but I think more so it's how they exist in the world is very bizarre. It's very unnatural, but it's 40k, and 40k is a very unnatural setting. You know, you've got people dying in the millions, and it's just another Tuesday, who cares? It's almost like the Eldar retained their fantasy kind of esque lore, where they're very much a dead and dying race, and you kind of don't have that many things going on. Like, well, with the craft world stuff, like living on their ships and whatnot, flying through space. A codified thought to the faction. I would just say the Votann, the Leagues of Votann, are the ever-grinding cogs of, like, a machine that can never be sated. They want more, 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 more. They're dwarves. They're greedy. But this is, like, taken to the extreme. Don't they go after planets for, like, their resources and whatnot and, you know, take it through force if they don't agree? Like, this is pure greed, right, to further their own efforts. And for the most part, their own efforts were just kind of existing. Like, I suppose now, supposedly with them going out and trying to, like, do stuff in the known world because shit's going down and they kind of have to make themselves known, you'd probably want as much resources as you can to just produce stuff. I guess in that aspect. Maybe, yeah. I mean, the Imperial... Well, that's... Yeah. I think that's a bit of the draw from the Votann, for sure. Them not being kind of like Eldar in a way. We're good, we're chilling. We're watching a video and scraping plastic. Jeff Bezos, Amazon Space Explorer faction. They look cool, though. A lot of their stuff looks cool. I actually am more inclined to like the Necromunda squats. More so than, like, the actual Votanners. The kin. From the Votann stuff. Like, this drill, the Vartigen Exo drill, is sick. Like, that's cool. That thing is awesome.
Within their society. Some of these roles may include becoming something like a generalist, a strategic advisor, combat shock trooper, mining support unit, cargo lugger, combat pilot, or just about anything else you can think of. The mechanical construct that makes up their body is just as important to them as flesh and blood are to any living organic creature. However, they can survive as a cerebral unit alone if they take extraordinary amounts of damage. Their primary purpose is to assist the flesh and blood kin with just about every aspect of their lives. Yet, make no mistake, they are not treated or viewed as mechanical slaves. Far from it. They're treated fully as equals. Just how advanced these AIs actually are is not fully known, but the lore states that they're only able to mimic the emotions and drives of living creatures. They express pride, camaraderie, courage, empathy, and anger, just like anyone else would, but these are merely systems designed to aid in their social integration. The kin live by a variety of different idioms that they refer to as the truths, and not to be confused with the first truths. Although being simple in structure, and often including no more words than is necessary to convey their ideal, the gravity of each of these truths carries more significance and a considerable nuance that any amount of words couldn't truly capture. The most common of these sayings is "the ancestors are watching," often heard shouted on the fields of battle. To be a member of the Leagues of Votann is to constantly strive to live up to the ideals set by your forebears. Now, they believe their ancestors live on within them, through their brothers and sisters, and are spiritually, philosophically, and in some senses due to the use of cloning, quite literally standing beside them. There are hundreds of other truths, some great and powerful, and others small and often humorous. Worthless objects, for example, are known as a prize for an orc, whereas the truth, "the void is in our veins," is in reference to the kin's long history of void travel, how they are just as comfortable out in the void of space as they are with their boots upon solid ground. Every single kin belongs to a larger group known as a kindred. These groups can range in size from being quite small, with their total population measuring in only the couple of dozens, all the way up to having thousands, if not millions, of individual members. Every kin within a kindred was formed from the crucibles it controls, meaning that they are all genetically related, and you can think of a kindred more like an extended family. Their genetic bond is seen as being stronger than any flag or banner. And when they are not at war
everything
or
is taken to
traveling
the
stars,
extreme, exactly.
they often
Yep,
live
everything in
within their
40K has to be
hold.
because that's
Now,
just the world
admittedly,
everyone lives in.
The word hold
Absolutely.
is a pretty simplistic term here for a pretty broad category. And the naming convention makes sense, as the kin are raised to never waste any resource, and that includes words. A hold can take on the form of a wide array of different structures and or locations. Some of them are fusions of fortifications, cities, industrial complexes, strip mines, and just about anything else you can think of. Now, many are absolutely monolithic, sprawling across the surface of their worlds and honeycombing deep beneath their surface. However, there are a lot of different types of holds. For example, a kindred's hold could take the form of a heavily armored void station, or in some instances, a chain of habitable domes scattered throughout an asteroid belt. It is said a kindred's heart consists of the 4 pillars: the hearth, the forge, the fane, and the crucible. The hearth is the fire that burns at the heart of the hold, a massive burning reactor that powers a kindred's hold and its defenses. The forge is where all of the kindred's weapons, equipment, tools, vehicles, and technologies are researched and crafted. The fane, a sacred structure of ancient technological interfaces, resembling something like a techno-temple. This is where the Grimnir can directly interface with the Votan, and thus a fane is viewed as the fountain from which all wisdom flows. And finally, the 4th pillar, the crucible, where the genomic cloning technologies are housed and each subsequent generation of kin is forged. Another part of a kindred's hold is something that is ironically and somewhat humorously not considered to be a 5th pillar. This is a huge spherical chamber known as a Spakarond. It is here that a ruling council of guildmasters, senior officers, and Grimnir gather to debate one another on the best path forward for their people. The kin are known for being remarkably stubborn and firm in their beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, that's a cool thing. Again, it's very 40k, right? Like, you literally are spawned from, like, the genetics of your ancestors, and with that, you know, you kind of have to hold yourself to, like, the highest standards because you're with them and whatnot, and it's very... There are aspects of the Votan that are very dwarvish. Like, that is something dwarves do. You know, they're not, like, all directly related to them, but I guess in a way... No, not really. But, you know... That's a cool thing to have. Revere your ancestors, and now that you're spawned from the same pool that they came from or whatever, it's like, okay.
Especially when they think they're right about something, and thus debate over the simplest of issues can often take far more time than is actually necessary. Despite this, they are not characteristic of the types of politics that other species participate in. There are people that don't often give in to selfish pursuits of their own interest. Each individual kin is deeply rooted in their people's traditions and does truly wish to guide their kindred in the best way possible. They just can't always agree on what form that path should take. Even greater still than a kindred is what is known as a league. Now, just about every single kindred is part of a league, and its individuals share a joint loyalty between both of them. Some of these leagues are absolutely ancient, having existed for countless millennia, while many more are quite small and have only arisen in the last couple of centuries. The very first of the leagues were formed by kindreds who were in direct possession of an ancestor core, also known as a Votan, but we'll get to them shortly. The original purpose of these leagues was to create mutually beneficial military alliances amongst the different kindred, to not only ensure their own safety, but more importantly, the safety of the Votan. As the kin spread throughout the galactic core, and their people's population expanded exponentially, many of the leagues grew in size and power comparable to star-spanning nations. Over time, these leagues, and thus the kindred that were united under their banners, would take on distinct personalities and specializations. For example, the kindred of the Greater Thurian League tended towards the original values of trade and prospecting, whereas the Trans-Hyperion Alliance became renowned for its exploratory efforts. Although it's incredibly rare due to how traditional the kin are, it's not unheard of for an entire kindred to forsake their league in order to join a different one. Because of this, many leagues have ended up declining in power and importance, where others have been annihilated wholesale by war or tragedy. The guilds, on the other hand, are completely different and owe no allegiance to any individual league. In fact, they spread through all of them. Each of the guilds represents a certain function within society and is made up of members that fulfill that particular role. There are guilds for research, cloning, crafting, farming, mining, cooking, and engineering, just to name a few. If it's possible to build a trade around it, then there's probably a guild for it. There's a lot of benefits for a tradesman to join a guild, as it will give them access to greater technology and a band of like-minded brothers and sisters, all working towards the betterment of their craft, and thus kin society as a whole. That being said, the kin are not forced to join a guild, and are freely capable of operating as a freelancer. In some instances, even going so far as setting up a rival guild. The point of the guilds is to ensure fair competition, and each one of them is ruled over by one or more guild masters that end up setting the standards for guild accreditation, as well as upholding the expected levels of workmanship and ties that the members must pay. Guild masters of particularly powerful and esteemed guilds are even allowed to participate in the Spacker Node, making sure the voice of their guild is heard and the will of its members taken into consideration during their debates.
It's very
It's not
dwarvish.
uncommon
Guilds
for
are very
competition
dwarvish.
amongst rival guilds to end up becoming heated, especially when both of them end up sending oath bands into the same sections of space with vast unclaimed wealths of natural resources, much to the dismay of the native species that often get caught in the crossfire between the competing parties, who end up racing to be the first to claim these riches. It's perhaps because of this competition and the high standards enforced by the guild masters that the guild structure works so incredibly well, and ultimately is seen as a massive benefit to kin society. They make trade and transit between the different kindreds much easier, as well as providing organizational administration and support within the greater leagues. They provide star mining, gravitic fracking, military supply chains, voidcraft repair, provision of
Council gets together, okay, can we please figure it out and stop the new spawns coming out with mashed potato skulls? I mean, you need them, though. Those guys are the front line, with the stinky dudes who smell like shit. Because, like, one ancestor decided not to shower. I don't know. That was his thing. You said to the extreme, you have to honor your ancestors because you are your ancestors. I mean, that's the whole, like, yeah, again, 40k thing where everything is so fucking extreme just because the universe is extreme. Like, one massive battle in 40k is the equivalent of, like, the biggest battle ever in fantasy. Most likely. If not tenfold. So, yeah, it's just when you have a universe that's very unrelenting and shit goes down and you could potentially lose millions in the blink of an eye, what do you do?
of food and water,
What do you do?
construction of homes and holds, and many other services in relation to manufacturing and distribution. So where do the Leagues of Votan get their name from? What exactly is a Votan? Well, if you ask anyone outside of the Leagues, they would simply tell you that they are the gods worshipped by the kin. Or perhaps, if you were asking a more pious member of the ecclesiarchy, they may tell you they were a form of demon that had enslaved their society and constantly whispered blasphemous ideals into their minds.
Could be.
Since the kin speak of the Votan in terms of great reverence, but never actually discuss their true nature with outsiders, this has given rise to a plague of rumors about their true nature, each one more fantastical than the last. These other species can believe whatever they want, as what others think of them is of very little import to the kin. And in a lot of cases, the whispers of deities and demons end up being a pretty convenient cover story for what the Votan actually are, as in many regards, they are perhaps the most valuable treasure in the entire galaxy: information. You see, the Votan, or Ancestor Cores as they're also known, are sacred artificial intelligences. Despite being a secular society, the kin revere them in a way that is suspiciously similar to worship. In essence, they are fonts of wisdom, an amalgamation of the spirits of their ancestors, a giver of life, the founder of the kin's vision of an afterlife, and a quantum supercomputer, the likes of which we can't even begin to understand, all wrapped up into one big package.
Grimnir's
The level of
hulls are
information
a
contained
computer.
within each ancestor core is so vast that it borders on the realm of the supernatural. Their self-organized data stacks and quantum info cores hold all of the information that any species would ever need in order to thrive in the depths of space, whether that be a plethora of STCs, weapon specifications, scientific and philosophical learnings, genealogical data, or military and survival theory, just to name a few. One of the most shocking and interesting things about the kin's relationship with the Votan is what happens when a member of their species dies. You see, tradition dictates that they be fed back into the machine. Their bodies and minds are broken apart and distilled into usable natural resources, which will be used to produce new clones. While all of the information within the brain of the deceased joins with the artificial intelligence, and thus the great ocean of knowledge that was contributed by their ancestors. They refer to this practice as going home to the ancestors, and the melding of minds like this is generally...
So I can't wait to go home to my ancestors, and then you get fucking ground up into mincemeat and then sent through the... I mean, they're a clone. Who cares? I mean, it's interesting. It's very interesting. It's like... I mean, it's 40k. Let's just keep watching.
Perceived as their version of the afterlife. To become one with the Votan and thus all of their ancestors is a glorious fate to be treasured. It's one that each and every one of the kin hopes will be their fate when they die. This puts pressure on each of them to live up to the ideals and accomplishments of all those that came before, to live a life full of adventure and experience everything the universe has to offer. This drives them to illuminate dark new corners of the galaxy and witness things that no kin had ever seen before. This is a major motivator for groups known as oath bands, who set out to fight as mercenaries in the wars of other races. Doing this allows them to experience a plethora of different cultures, military strategies, and ways of life that are unfamiliar to the kin. The immediate effects of this are that they return to their people, more grizzled and wiser than ever before, with a host of new information on potentially hostile foes and the locations of vast caches of untapped resources. Later on in their life, when it's their time to go home to the ancestors, their well-lived life will make for a glorious contribution to the Votan.
They get turned into McDonald's chicken nuggets. Like, all the good bits are saved, and then the rest of them just get fucking, like,
memories and wisdom,
chicken nuggeted.
not only enriching the mind of the Votan itself, but their physical essence, as well as their accumulated wisdom, being used in future generations of clones, allowing them to figuratively,
That's
and
cool, though.
at least in some regard, semi-literally, live on through each subsequent generation. The practice most likely originated in a time when the kin were just a fledgling species coming into their own, and resources were incredibly scarce. No resource, including their very flesh and memories, could afford to be wasted. However, as the kin's numbers have increased exponentially and their empire has cemented itself throughout the galactic core, adherence to this ancient tradition has seen an ever-increasing number.
What if there is biomatter loss on the battlefield? Well, I mean, you're still going to pump out stuff. It's more so, like, when you have this many, I don't think you're really, like, out of bodies when you could just kind of create more, right? So if you do miss people on the battlefield, I'm sure that's kind of like, oh my god, my ancestry, it's gone. Oh, we have a million more, you know, type of deal. But it's interesting.
Minds being fed into the Votan each and every year, putting an ever-increasing strain upon these ancient machines and their dwindling memory banks as they continue to be flooded with redundant data. The worst fate that can befall a member of the Leagues of Votan is not death, far from it. Going home to the ancestors is something to be celebrated. It is in fact being exiled. Those who have committed unforgivable sins against their own people, whether it be through the act of murder, abject failure, or the extreme wastage of resources, the ultimate punishment is to be cast out from the Leagues, to be exiled into the stars, and never be allowed to return. To be exiled in such a way is a punishment that inspires true dread amongst the kin. It means you will never join with your ancestors, and the entire collection of your life experiences will be rendered meaningless, as they will not be recorded. Your essence will never exist within future generations, and you will be seen as nothing but a waste. Many believe that it would have been better to never have drawn a single breath than to be subjected to such a punishment. The great tragedy of the Votan is that whoever originally created them couldn't possibly have foreseen the future in which they would find themselves in the 42nd millennia. They clearly were not designed to operate indefinitely, and as every year passes, its vast treasure trove of information becomes harder and harder to access for the kin. The sheer overwhelming amount of data that has been fed into these cores for the past 20 or 30,000 years has pushed even their inconceivable storehouses to the point of overflowing. We don't know much about their early history or purpose, but it's a pretty reasonable guess to say that they weren't constructed to be a godlike guiding force for an entire species. The Dark Age of technology was filled with fantastical tech that many in the 42nd millennia would find it impossible to believe ever existed. So even something as ludicrously powerful as the Ancestor Cores very well may have been something that was seen as mundane during this time. The questions that have been presented to the Votan over the millennia have caused them to adapt their own processing subroutines through a form of self-guided artificial evolution. This evolution is often generated by the Votan itself, based upon the needs of the kin that frequently access it. However, the over-association they have with the true living minds of the kin that frequently access them or have been fed into them have led some of these ancestor cores to develop seemingly strange behavioral quirks that border on personalities. Over time, they have become more philosophical and ponderous in nature, whereas in ancient times they could answer any possible question in a matter of moments. Now, even the most mundane of questions could potentially take months, years, or even centuries to receive an answer. And all too often, the answer that comes back is presented in the form of another question. Information that is not pulled out of the data cores frequently ends up getting buried deeper and deeper and becomes harder and harder to access, whereas the information that is regularly drawn upon is mired in self-replicating layers of data amendments, which in turn fills up the limited memory that the Votan have left and undoubtedly plays a role in the development of their personalities. In some sense, it's almost as if these artificial minds are suffering the effects of aging, some thankfully taking the form of
Got
wise
the
elders
Simers.
that do instill wisdom upon the youth, albeit in esoteric and sometimes confusing ways, while others seem to be suffering from a form of artificial dementia, subject to mood swings that can often turn disastrous. It's incredibly rare, but there have been new Votan that have popped up in the past, as the Fanes that the Grimnir used to speak with them have on occasion developed a sentience of their own and ascended to the ranks of a brand new Votan. This is a once in multiple generation occurrence and cause for overwhelming celebration by the kin, but the sad reality is that it's far more common for a Votan to completely degrade to the point of being nothing more than a Fane itself, or most tragically of all, to go insane. To witness the slow but inevitable death of such an entity is like witnessing a treasured loved one lose themselves to dementia, more and more
That's
of their
horrible.
personality fading away day by day, simple tasks becoming harder and harder for them until there's eventually nothing left. The kin will rigidly defend the ancestor cores until their dying breath, and would gladly sacrifice themselves to prevent any harm from coming to them. However, the galaxy is filled with horrors, and this is not always possible. There's one particularly tragic example of a Votan and the league it was associated with finding themselves directly in the path of a tendril of Hive Fleet Leviathan. The kindred that had sworn to defend it with their lives stood their ground as the Tyranids descended upon them.
I'm pretty sure this here is the original lore for the squats when they were all eaten by Tyranids. I believe this was the initial reason from like the Rogue Trader era stuff that the squats were gone. This is just the redux of it, right?
They were hopelessly outnumbered and ended up getting slaughtered to a man. To keep their bodies from being absorbed by the foul Xenos invaders, they were fed into the Votan in overwhelming numbers incredibly quickly. The combined pain, anger, and hatred from the last days of their life completely overwhelmed the AI, driving it insane. The great irony is that after all of the kin had been slain, the Tyranids completely ignored the ancient AI and left the world as a dead and barren husk, leaving only the lonely Votan behind, buried deep beneath its surface, to wallow in its own misery and madness. This insane Votan is now referred to as the Mad Core, and all the other leagues know not to sail near its tortured mind. When it comes to war, the kin are incredibly pragmatic in battle, almost to the point of seeming dispassionate. This is because they are always calculating risk versus reward with every decision that they make. And this isn't to say that the kin don't form bonds of brotherhood within their kin host, far from it. Their bonds are cemented in traditions of bellowing oaths for all their brethren to hear, booming battle cries, the singing of war songs, and just a touch of dark gallows humor. What you have to remember about them is that they originally came from nothing, and have carved out an existence for themselves in one of the most hostile areas of the galaxy. They don't waste anything, especially the lives of their kin. They see no shame in retreating from either an unwinnable engagement, or one in which the cost of victory in lives and resources would be too high. They have no problem with abandoning valuable positions or breaking off from an engagement. They will do so without a second thought, and it will be done calmly with a grim acceptance that to stay would incur too high of a price. Kin leaders that refuse to yield and would continuously throw lives away even in the face of an unwinnable engagement are seen as honorless and selfish. To the leagues of Votan, a Pyrrhic victory is nothing to be celebrated. Their most esteemed leaders and generals have mastered a
Not
skill
Bush,
they
yo
refer
buddy,
to
thank
as
you,
the
sir.
Eye of
I
the
was actually on
Ancestor.
your stream
In
earlier.
its most simplest form,
You were doing like some dwarves. You were sculpting like I don't want to say threading. What were they? Tailoring dwarves. That was cool,
allows
dude.
a leader to, at a glance, determine which
you,
enemies
buddy.
pose the greatest threat and identify any and all weak points within their
Dwarven
ranks and
hands.
fortifications. They're able to
Yeah, they
quickly
looked really
calculate
good, man.
the
That shit
exact
came out
amount of
great.
resources to apply to each and every threat in order to strike the best possible balance between results and cost. The kin are often characterized by their level heads and calm demeanors, even in the face of overwhelming odds. There are, however, some enemies that push their patience to the breaking point. Foes that have time and time again insulted the leagues or committed gruesome and unforgivable acts against their people. The anger and hatred of the kin is not something that is easy to rouse, but once the dam is broken, their fury can only be doused in the blood and complete eradication of their foes. It is in these moments when they
Sorry,
are
we're
pushed
just
beyond
watching,
the superhuman bounds of their incredible patience.
With the likeness of the clients, that's cool. That's an interesting thing that people want to get turned into dwarves. I like it. How long does that usually take? Like, for that one in particular, how long would that take? A month? 2 months? Yeah, lore videos are great. It's just we're kind of like not necessarily dissecting it. It's more so forcing ourselves to enjoy it. The Leagues of Votann aren't really my favorite thing. It's like they're a little bit far-fetched for me, but you know, there's aspects that are cool. 180 hours per character typically. Jeez, yeah, that's good. That's a long time. That's not too bad though. You got like multiple things going on at once. You like, you know, work on one and then you're like, oh, okay, I want to do something else for now, and then you work on a different one. Yep, that's how it do. That's how it do. I would imagine working on one thing non-stop 24/7 can kind of get like tiring in a way. You kind of need that creative break to just see something different sometimes, I suppose. Maybe it's different for you, but yeah. One project per day of the week. Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you have a lot going on, that's great. That's what I'm trying to do. Like, while making minis, I'm trying to work on, like, commemorative things that were released from Games Workshop. Just to keep it fresh so it's not boring, right? Because then you just kind of burn yourself out doing the same thing. It does keep it fun.
That the kin seem to lose all sense of reason and perspective, not hesitating for even a moment to spend countless lives and shocking quantities of resources to ensure the destruction of all those that have insulted them, unleashing waves of unrelenting destruction and casting themselves into the fires of certain doom to make sure their grudge will be paid in tides of blood. A grudge, in its simplest form, is a pledge created by an individual kin or an entire kindred, or in some extreme cases, even a full-on league. This is done in order to gain vengeance or, at the very least, answer an intolerable insult. Now, the kin will often form what they refer to as grudge bands, bands of warriors that have sworn binding oaths to quest and fight together until either the grudge in question has been settled or all of its members have been slain. They will settle for nothing less than the complete and utter destruction of the identified enemy, regardless of the cost of lives or material. From the outside perspective, this seems like a complete reversal of everything that the kin believe, that nothing, especially the lives of their comrades, is to be wasted. But to the kin, grudges come as naturally as breathing. When one is formed, the eyes of the
Dwarves hate
ancestors fall
everything.
upon them and demand retribution. To allow such insults to go unanswered would be to shame themselves and all that came before. Once a grudge is formed, it can only be settled in blood. All of the military forces of the kindred are collectively referred to as a kin host. They are comprised of the kindred's massed soldiers, its elite artillery, war engines, and any auxiliary groups. The core of any kin host is built around what they refer to as the soldiers of the line, and the most common of these are the hearthkin, technically banned.
I really do like the hearthkin aesthetic. Pretty sure they've got two types of weapons. I mean, God, I have the sprues in the garage because I'm selling them. But I believe... Do I have a box here with me? I got a box. Box. I do like... Let me see here. I mean, their individuality definitely comes from their face sculpts. Like, if you're in this setting and you've kind of conquered everything, even cloning your own race to, like, near, you know, innumerable numbers, right? Your gear's probably going to be pretty decked out. There's something... I think if I actually try and do the Leagues of Votann, I'm going to try and personalize them just a little bit. Like, in a way, each... how would that even work? In fantasy, dwarves are very much kind of tasked with keeping their own gear, right? More so relics from their past, like their father's hand-me-down fucking gear, like his helmet or his axe, you know, their grandfather's clothing, whatever it may be. In this setting, I feel like it'd be a little bit different, because what if someone isn't very in tune with, like, keeping their gear up to snuff, you know? Like, they'd almost have to be kind of like an engineer for 40k, rather than in fantasy where you just kind of walk around with, like, a little plated helmet. Old world dwarf faces? if you were to do that, you'd have to put them in the suit. I was more so interested in foregoing their head sculpts and just straight up doing Caradron. Because the way the Caradron look are more individualized. Like, people have already done this. This is not new. But the Caradron head sculpts are very personal. They really reflect kind of like an actual dwarf under there, instead of this being just like, I'm in space. Which makes sense, don't get me wrong. But I do like these. Like, these helmets are so sick. They're so good. More so the Arcanaut stuff, because this is like the elites, obviously, but dwarves wearing dwarvish things that look like dwarves is very dwarf. Like, a dwarf is a dwarf, and when they go to war, they look like a fucking dwarf, because they're wearing armor that looks like them. So, maybe I'd do that, but then try and work in, like... How would you make this personal? How could you make each one of their pieces of gear look like their own? Maybe that's a bit too far-fetched. To a degree. Maybe some sort of, like, heraldry or... like, yeah, runic symbol. Yeah, like, family things, gears, I don't know. To them, this is just, oh shit, we gotta go do stuff, load it up. Get the suit on, let's go, we got shit to do. I'd like to think that each suit of armor could potentially be some sort of, like, heirloom. You know, their forebearers kind of, like, wore it, and so do I, right? One piece of armor is passed down. See, that's the thing. But, like, at the same time, this is very much assembly line looking gear. Like, that's what I love about dwarves, where all of them are different, right? When you're living in a world where you're just kind of sword and board and, you know, you don't have big factories creating perfect, like, replica pieces of gear, everything would be more so unique. That's kind of what I want to do with this. Like, again, the one unique thing about the Votann are their head sculpts. Even their elite units, like the Ironhear Hearthguard, which I think I have a box to them. These guys. I believe each one is supposed to be a decorated individual who's kind of like had their name stamped somewhere and, you know, we know who that is, right? But they all kind of just look the same. The only difference is the little bits of, like, filigree. The little gold tidbits, and then they show their head sculpts, but the heads are kind of like, you know, put a helmet on. I think these would look sick with the original squat helmets. Not with, like... Because what inspired me to even, like, give the Leagues of Votann a chance last night, and I was reading through this book. This is, like, the old, basically squat lore. It's, like, the original Leagues of Votann stuff. And, my favorite fucking minis were these. It was the Warlord and his Hearthguard. Essentially, this was a call, currently. And then these guys were, like, his bodyguards. But each one of them had different helmets. They all had their own unique individual gear that would stand alone, right? You know, it's not like, I need 3 of you. It's like, give me Jim, Toe Fungus, and Bob. Leave, I don't know, Tom behind. Whatever it may be, right? Like, there's something about individualism with dwarves that's, like, very much them. And they almost lose a bit of identity when you don't have that, right? Especially for these decorated heroes, these guys who have done things that need to be kind of out there. When you all look the same, but your deeds are very much different, and you're an absolute individual in every way, how is this special? And what makes it worse, I think, is their helmets. Their helmets are literally just the generic, like, Hearthkin helmets. The physical, yeah, see, that's the problem. The physical structure to differentiate, like, to be different would be impossible. Because this is so, again, it's like manufactured. It's very much for the environment. I want it to make sense, but I also want it to be unique in a way. Which is so crazy. Because, like, I'm looking at these again. I'm looking at the Caradron. And each of the Grunstock Thunderers all have different gear. Like, this is literally perfect aesthetic, in my eyes. Like, I guess the leg bits are kind of the same, but, like, the shoulders are all different, I think. Different. I wonder how sick the Hearthguard would look if you actually gave them these helmets. That would look cool. And again, people have already done this. This is old news, but... maybe I'm leaning too heavy. I mean, this shit straight up looks like 40K. It's like... two Fenris wolves have names? Yeah, that's... every single thing in the universe would have a name. Right? Again, this is just... if you're a gamer and you just want to throw shit on the table, that's fine. But, like, I do like the narrative. I like kind of the flavor behind an army. If it was real, what would it sound like? What would their names be? So on and so forth. Yeah, I've got a 3D printer. Maybe not so much in the way of, like, actually sculpting, but I was thinking of maybe, like, kit bashing a bunch of different boxes to try and see if that would make sense. There's been a few. There has been a few different things people have done, but for now it's just ideas.
Bands of citizen soldiers that are considered stoic and dependable and make for a hardy battle line. Every member of the Hearthkin is not a soldier by trade, and in fact, in peace times, their primary focus is built around their trade of choice. When roused to war, the Hearthkin are trained just as frequently and rigorously as the elite warriors of many other races. In fact, a trainee will not be permitted to join a band of Hearthkin until they're able to pass a rigorous series of trials that will test their endurance, marksmanship, courage, aggression, and tactical acumen. Interestingly enough, this is a common pattern that we're going to see repeated quite frequently, as with the exception of the Einherjar formations or the Thanes, none of their units or war engines are made solely for combat. They all serve different fundamental purposes, but due to their training, construction, or equipment, can switch to their secondary role as a unified fighting force with relative ease. Many of the would-be recruits that aspire to become Hearthkin, or any other designation of line soldier, normally are born with a host of clone skins that are suitable for combat. Whether they have the ability to rapidly heal from physical injuries, see in low light conditions, or are gifted with incredible endurance or hardened skin. As it turns out, the mutations that make them into some of the best miners in the galaxy are also pretty effective on the battlefield. This is taken to even further extremes, as the Kindred is often willing to expend considerable, albeit measured resources to augment their soldiers. These upgrades can include additional mechanical organs, extra limbs, cerebral communication chips, ocular targeting implants, and all kinds of other useful additions. And furthermore, they go into battle sporting the best armor and weaponry that the Kindred can provide them, whether this take the form of hardened void armor and/or an array of potent weaponry from Autek pattern bolters, ion blasters, and high-las auto rifles. Void armor is built upon what is known as a void suit, which itself is threaded with a bastion ally reinforcement and fitted with an array of thermoregulatory radiation-hardened underlayers. The void suit is a rugged piece of utility wear that serves as an all-purpose enviro suit, immune to the damaging effects of many hostile environments, and can even be used as a fully functioning spacesuit. The suit is fitted with a swath of different connector relays that allow it to be upgraded to fill many different purposes. It can be outfitted with an exoframe, a pressure
Let me listen to this again.
Rifles. Void armor is built upon what is known as a void suit, which itself is threaded with a bastion ally reinforcement and fitted with an array of thermoregulatory radiation-hardened underlayers. The void suit is a rugged piece of utility wear that serves as an all-purpose enviro suit, immune to the damaging effects of many hostile environments, and can even be used as a fully functioning spacesuit. The suit is fitted with a swath of different connector relays that allow it to be upgraded to fill many different purposes. It can be outfitted with an exoframe, a pressure rig, or be reinforced into the iconic Void Armor. The Void Armor component provides a substantial level of personal protection and is a multi-layer defense system against atmospheric hazards, while simultaneously being equipped with a full suite of scaling.
You know, I maybe like the idea that the only thing realistically that should be altered would be their heads. Maybe since your environment kind of breeds the way you dress, if you're in space and you're this faction, kind of always on the move doing something, you need to kind of be prepared for everything. But the flavor of the gear could come from the helmet, which kind of represents their individuality, right? Like, maybe that could be it. Maybe I could cope and just say that, you know? I want to learn more about the separate leagues, like the Cronus Hegemony. I mean, maybe it's here. No. I mean, like the Chthonian mining guilds there.
Gaining and communications.
Wikipedia.
It's not on the same level
Wikipedia.
as Astartes power armor, but it's certainly far more in depth and protective than the standard issue flak armor handed out to guardsmen. Another common piece of gear that can be found throughout the kin host is what is known as, and this is a mouthful, but a haptic utility nerve transmission recalibrator, also referred to as a hunter module. This device basically establishes a neurological link between the user and their firearms. It sends out small, barely noticeable pulses of gravitational assistance from projectors that are built into the weapons in order to create an incredibly stable firing platform, even while the wielder is sprinting across the battlefield, or being jolted by shell impacts, or riding over bumpy terrain in a vehicle. At first glance, a lot of the League's firearms actually bear a striking resemblance to their Imperial counterparts. They use weapons like the Autok pattern bolter, or energy weapons like the High-Las auto rifle. Although they seem quite similar to the weapons utilized by humanity, they are designed in a different way and use a bunch of superlative materials in their construction, like accelerator coils, that not only make them stronger, but more reliable, even in the most adverse conditions. The Kin's firepower is incredibly effective, but it's not the only weapons that they bring to bear, as when fighting enemies that utilize horde tactics like the Orcs or the Tyranids, it is an inevitable conclusion that they will at one point be overwhelmed and have to rely on close quarters combat. In such situations, the Kin have a fondness for plasma field generators to rend the blades of their weapons in monomolecular cutting fields that allow them to cleave apart physical shields and armor with relative ease. They also utilize what are known as concussion weapons that normally take the form of hammers, mauls, or even iron gauntlets. They use mass drivers in order to amplify the force of their impact to ridiculous degrees. The most terrifying melee weapons that the Leagues of Votann utilize are constructed from a material known as Dark Star ore, which is mined from the fringes of the dead zones. The material has the remarkable ability to emit a universal dampening field that can shut down organic and mechanical functions on contact. It's no small task to construct a weapon from such a dangerous material, as even the slightest cut from a blade made of Darkstar ore can end a victim's life like flicking off a light switch. Due to the fact that no kin is seen as expendable, this has led to the kin host supporting numerous field medics that have been given exhaustive training in first aid while under fire, as well as being tutored in engineering, so they can give the same medical attention to the Ironkin soldiers. The strong bonds of loyalty that each member of a squad forms with one another generates an interweaving network of camaraderie between each and every unit. Furthermore, when a kin displays incredible aptitude for battle, they are often given additional training in order to use some of the specialist weaponry that the kin host has access to. This can take the form of the L7 missile launcher or the Atakarn plasma beamer. While conversely, if they demonstrate a strong propensity for leadership, their superiors will have the option to nominate them to be promoted to the rank of Thane or squad leader. Even further up the ranks, it is possible for them to extend into one of two spheres. They may obtain the rank of Call, individuals that stand apart as war leaders and generals, or they may find themselves inducted into the ranks of the Einhir, warriors that fulfill roles such as that of elite shock troops, bodyguards, or even boarding parties. Now, it's important to know that these two spheres are not mutually exclusive, and there have been a handful of notable individuals that have existed in both simultaneously. The Einhir are characterized by their massive servo-assisted suits of power armor, known as exo armor, an incredibly durable and powerful suit that is able to shrug off anti-tank fire while simultaneously enhancing its wearer's physical strength to superhuman levels. The suits themselves also have the ability to mount many esoteric and powerful weaponry systems, including the Atakarn plasma brands, Vulcanite destructors, concussion weapons, plasma blades, and even what is known as a mass accelerator that can turn the wielder and its suit into a living battering ram. The other most common element that you'll see within the kin host are its auxiliary forces, which are made up of the Hernkin, the Chthonian miners, and the Brachir engineers. The Hernkin are the pioneers of kin society, and set off into the stars, viewing each and every region of blank space as a mystery in need of solving. They plumb the depths of the void in order to unlock its secrets and claim ownership of its long-forgotten riches. It is because of their exploratory efforts that the kin have managed to chart out hundreds if not thousands of additional worlds. To be amongst their ranks is seen as an incredibly prestigious position that brings a high amount of honor in kin society. But it's also a really difficult life, as the kin are very social and have strong familial bonds. To be out in the void and away from their hold for decades at a time can certainly take its toll. Despite this, it's due to their efforts that the Leagues are informed of great galactic dangers presented to their species, such as stars on the edge of going supernova, or the true nature of different aliens that they would encounter, whether they would intend to harm their people or would make for good trade partners. It is normally the Hernkin that make first contact with these different aliens, and it is through their diplomatic efforts that the kin are able to establish trading documents. Because their role as frontiersmen is seen as so important to the continuation of their society, the Leagues make sure the Hernkin are as well equipped as possible, whether this take the form of the most advanced scouting ships they are capable of,
I kind of wish they had
engineering,
wheels,
or a wide array of armored gunships and rugged exploration vehicles. Not to mention they're also given a pretty impressive arsenal of weaponry. Possibly their most interesting piece of tech is what is known as a panspectral scanner. This device is able to detect a huge range of different energy spectrums through solid matter, and even across multi-dimensional
Yeah, the wheeled
wavelengths.
stuff looks really
Not
good.
only is this a super useful tool for scouting and prospecting, but it means that in combat, their units are rarely ever surprised. There are very few things in this universe that can get past one of their scanners undetected. The next auxiliary unit that you will see within a kin host are the Brachir. Now, the Brachir are the engineers and forge masters of the Leagues of Votan, individuals who design all of the equipment and technology used throughout kin society. Not only do they follow the traditional schematics of designs derived from the wisdom of the Votan, but in contrast to their Adeptus Mechanicus counterparts, they view innovation as the only real way of honoring the ancestor cores. Each of the Brachir are a unique individual with their own quirks and different ways of doing things. So all of the equipment that they create has its own little flares that end up becoming their signature. When these flourishes end up proving to be quite effective, the Brachir of other forges may end up adapting them into their own work. It is through the slow but relentless process of improving upon technology that the kin have been able to develop and push the standard template constructs even further. The technology they create embodies the principles that all of the Brachir adhere to. Everything is built to prioritize reliability, utility, and efficiency over everything else. Their war gear is normally not designed to be flashy or showy. You won't see any ridiculous decorations hanging from their barrels that have some kind of ritual significance. Their gear is rugged and pragmatic. It is designed to be battered to destruction before it fails in the line of duty. Their role on the battlefield can come in a couple of different forms. For example, the Brachir Ironmaster is said to be one of the most accomplished of the Brachir within their kindred, and in battle they take on the role of maintaining damaged war engines. They're often aided by their Ironkin siblings and cog repair crews, which you can think of like a smaller Ironkin that's not really as smart, and normally takes on the role of something like a familiar, similar to the servo skulls or cherubs over in the Imperium. It's not uncommon for these eccentric artisans to also bring a host of their powerful personal projects into battle as well, in order to gain valuable insight through field testing. They get a particularly strong sense of accomplishment when they see their creations unleashed upon their foes. Sometimes the Brachir will hook their void suits up to powerful armored exoskeletons, and ditch their repair tools in exchange for massive heavy weapons, which they then use to lay down withering cover fire to protect their kin, and tear apart enemy armor from
He needs a beard.
These Brachir are
Guy needs a
traditionally
beard,
known
brother.
as the Thunderkin. The final auxiliary force is what is known as the Chthonian mining guilds. These men and women are some of the most rugged, tough-as-nails miners in the galaxy. They're absolutely fearless in the job of locating, securing, and harvesting resources for their species, and are constantly set loose into extreme environments laden with all manner of hazard that are completely hostile to sentient life. From violent gravity maelstorms,
You could use
meteor
older stuff.
collision
You could do
fields,
that.
irradiated nebula,
You just kind of have to put them on new
plague-ridden
relevant base
planetoids,
sizes
sweltering
and let
caverns,
the
crushing
opponent know
oceanic
what they are
depths, and the
if they just look weird.
gnawing fringes of black holes. They've even been known to plunder the
All of
riches
these
from
hobbies
space
are a
hulks
visual
shipwrecked in
one.
the warp
As
that are
long as your
infested with
opponent
all
knows
forms of
what the hell you're
supernatural
fielding,
horrors.
you're fine.
Most of the kin that would end up joining the Chthonian guilds have been adapted from birth with a variety of clone skeins that imbue them with a host of different upgrades that make them perfectly designed to work in such environments, from having hyperdense bone structures to extreme tolerance for radiation, the ability to perceive esoteric energy spectrums, vacuum-hardened organs, and not to mention seemingly supernatural levels of strength and endurance. On top of this, they are routinely given surgical procedures that augment them even further with reinforced skull plates, artificial organs, and a whole host of advantageous bionics. Needless to say, all of these adaptations and implants are also conveniently super advantageous on the field of battle. The units known as the Chthonian Berserks take any opportunity they can get to crack some skulls with their concussion balls, or lay into the enemy with their
I
heavy
agree,
plasma
they are.
axes, competing with one another to prove to themselves who's the toughest and the strongest. When it comes to mining, they look at resources that other species have already claimed as rightfully theirs by conquest, and think little of taking them for themselves, whether that take the form of plasma storage centers, asteroid fields in enemy territory, or in some instances, fully functioning void stations, or inhabited planetoids. They view all of these things as any other concentration of harvestable resources, and are willing to take them just like they would any other vein
you
of
can
ore.
sculpt beards,
They of course will attempt to
mohawks.
establish trade first. However, if those negotiations fail, or do not go in the Chthonian Guild's favor, then they'll declare war without a second thought. They follow a very specific truth that says that luck has, need keeps, and toil earns, which to them basically translates to, if somebody has something that they want, whoever is willing to fight for it the hardest is its rightful owner. Now, I just want to go on a quick side tangent here. Many of us hardcore 40k fans, specifically those who have kept up with the Horus Heresy, took special notice of these guys when they were originally announced, as they share a name with the planet that the Primarch Horus was from, leading many to speculate that they had some kind of connection. However, this does not seem to be the case, as Chthonian is incredibly far away from the galactic core, and there has never been any mentions of the Leagues of Votan interacting with this world or Horus himself. The word Chthonic is derived from an ancient Greek word that means earth or soil, and when translated, basically it is used to describe anything that's underneath the earth, normally in reference to ancient Greek gods that dwelled in the underworld. Considering that they're a group of miners and prospectors that are constantly exposed to hellish conditions, the word is an apt descriptor for them, and this is most likely just a coincidental instance of the same word being used across different cultures. It's also important to remember that all of the species we talk about in the lore speak their own languages. It's just being translated into Gothic for us as the audience. So it's likely that the word they use for themselves is not the same one as the arch-trader's homeworld. It's just the Gothic word that is used to describe something relating to mining and hazardous conditions. Although a rare occurrence, there have been dark times when civil war has raged between the kindreds or leagues. Such engagements are normally seen as dishonorable. War amongst their own people is always wasteful to the entirety of kin society, and such kindred that would selfishly pursue their own interests over the entirety of their species are perceived as arrogant and selfish. Normally when a region has been claimed by a league, the rest of the kin will honor it. The boundaries between sectors shifts very rarely, and when it does happen, it's normally due to an agreed-upon change of ownership, normally in part due to revised trade agreements. However, when it comes to species outside of their society, this is not always the case. Any area of space that is not directly under control of one of the leagues is considered to be open for conquest, regardless of whether or not it's already under control by a different species. The region's inhabitants are viewed simply as either an opportunity for a new trade partner or an obstacle that needs to be overcome. Now, of course, trade is always the preferred option, and the one that the kin will strive for first and foremost, so long as their agreements do not get in the way of their operations. And many kindred have managed to exist peacefully alongside other races for centuries at a time, forming tight alliances with their neighbors against hostile invaders and pirates. But there's something very important that you need to bear in mind here. They do not strive for diplomacy and strong relationships with their neighbors simply out of the goodness of their heart. Everything they do is ruthlessly calculated on a cost-based analysis. Normally, it is deemed that there is more to be gained through peaceful negotiations, and so that is the path they normally pursue, as trade is traditionally far more lucrative than open war. If, however, it is deemed that invasion will be more beneficial to the leagues in the long run, then they will not hesitate to take what they want by force. Regardless of their reasoning, it makes little difference to those being invaded. To them, the greedy acquisition efforts of the leagues look remarkably similar to the hate-fueled crusades of slaughter conducted by the Imperium, or the brutal, unrelenting raids by some of the more savage Xenos species. Although
Yeah,
the leagues
Uther the
present
Destined
themselves
has
as
like
humble
what,
miners and
one
explorers,
page?
the
Not even a full
reality
page?
is that they will relentlessly pursue their bottom line, just as zealously and sometimes cruelly as any crusade fleet would pursue its holy wars of faith. Perhaps mercifully for the other races of the galaxy, due to the kin's incredible technology and clone schemes that allow them to survive in the most hazardous of environments, the kin are able to colonize and excavate sections of space that are far too hazardous for most other species. And most often, these untouched areas of the galaxy that have gone unplundered since they were formed billions of years ago are normally far more rich in mineral deposits than those that have been inhabited for eons. Long story short, they make for a powerful ally so long as everything is on the up and up and they end up coming out ahead. But if you have something that they want and you refuse to give it to them, then they have no problem taking it by force. As far as they're concerned, it's just business. Over the millennia, the kin of the Leagues of Votan have in one way or another come into contact with all of the major species they share the galaxy with. And as can be expected of a dwarf-like race in the grimdark future, they're not big fans of anyone that doesn't look exactly like them. However, their views do differ from species to species. They view the orcs as their most hated enemies, as they encounter and war against them far more frequently than any other species. The orcs are also renowned for their inhuman levels of resilience, and thus are able to thrive within the galactic core. They find the Necrons fascinating, but also have a deep-seated dislike of them. They do, however, encounter them far less frequently than the orcs. Most often, when their mining operations dig too deep into a world that, unbeknownst to them, was actually a Necron tomb world. When it comes to the Tyranids, they are referred to only as the Bane, a term they prescribe to particularly intelligent and dangerous predators. The kin view them with a mixture of hatred and respect. They view them as an apex predator, one that is particularly dangerous to their operations. But much like the hunters of old Earth, such predators demand respect from those that would trespass in their hunting grounds. When it comes to the followers of Chaos, the kin have no time or patience for them, viewing them with a mixture of disgust and bewilderment. The fact that any living creature would walk such a selfish and honorless path is anathema to them. Although the Leagues of Votan have allied with the forces of humanity in the past, it is a shaky alliance at best. All too often, the Imperium has declared themselves their enemies and sought their eradication. Overzealous inquisitors deem them abhuman or Xenos abominations who have committed the sin of existence, whereas the members of the Adeptus Mechanicus are viewed as nothing more than superstitious tech shaman, an entire group that seems to view their overwhelming ignorance somehow as a positive trait. Their ways are shocking to the Leagues of Votan, and their ignorance makes them dangerous. Out of all the intelligent species within the galaxy, there seems to be only two that the kin have at least achieved something of a good might be too strong of a word, but more of a neutral relationship with. This is the Tau and the Eldari. Now, conflicts do still arise with these species, however. The kin view the Craftworlders as incredibly pompous and egotistical, whereas they want absolutely nothing to do with their sadistic Dark Eldar cousins, viewing them as little more than grotesque parasites that delight in gruesome excess. When it comes to the Tau, however, they have traded with them quite frequently, and it was actually the Leagues that introduced the Tau to ion technology in the first place. The more I read about the Leagues of Votan, the more I can't shake off this underlying feeling that there's something incredibly tragic about them. Now, on the surface, they seem kind of perfect, almost like they don't fit in the grimdark universe of the 42nd millennium. They value alliances with other species, they view war as a last resort, and they think of their people as a resource that is too valuable to be thrown away in needless violence. They're not afraid of AI and use it to further their own species' technological advancement, all the way to the point where their AI constructs are given equal rights and are viewed as brothers and sisters to them. Due to the years of cloning, they are at an incredibly low risk of demonic corruption, and with the exception of a bit of squabbling here and there, they don't seem to suffer the plague of infighting like other species do. They are a united people, working together towards a better tomorrow. But it's when you start to read between the lines, when you start to look at every single one of these elements with a bit more scrutiny, that you start to see an emerging pattern, a pattern that underlines a tragic existence, that compared to how they're presented, they seem to have a paradoxical dark side. The idea that every action they take is done first and foremost for the betterment of their empire can also be read in a way that shows that all they care about is the bottom line. The very notion that they view their kin as a resource makes them into a commodity, an asset to the business that is the kin empire. They value trade and alliance with other species so long as it proves profitable. The moment such an alliance is viewed as a net negative, or that more could be gained through a declaration of war, that alliance will shatter. Then the invasion fleets will be sent in to drain stars and shatter entire worlds. Their people are, in a sense, free to do what they wish, held only to the ideal of doing what is best for the empire through their rigid adherence to societal norms and relentless veneration of tradition. But this freedom is in fact an illusion. As in being an empire of clones, each and every one of them was built from a collective mismatch of different genetic archetypes to make them ideally suited for a very specific purpose, a role that was predetermined for them before their birth. They may present themselves as a free people through the frivolous decisions of whether or not to join a guild or to set out as a freelancer, but this choice is ultimately irrelevant, because if they were made to be a miner, then that is what they're going to do. If a clone is created to survive longer than his brothers and sisters on an irradiated death world, then without fail, that is where they're going to end up. To the point where, in a lot of instances, they will be specifically engineered to be suicidally brave, throwing their life away under the illusion that it was their own choice to do so. The reason the Empire was able to thrive in the first place was through the guiding wisdom of the Votan, but the ancient cores have begun to fail. Every day that goes by, they take longer and longer to deliver an answer to the most basic of problems. It's not a matter of whether or not these ancient machines will die.
It's so Jover.
It's a question of when. And what will the leagues do then? Without the Votan, they will be ultimately alone. With the death of their god comes the death of their afterlife. And even further, the true death of the spirits of all their ancestors. What will they do when their gods and ancestors speak to them no more? What will they do when their ancestors can no longer see them? They sport some of the greatest technology the galaxy has seen since the dark age of technology, yet they owe this all to the Votan. They laugh and mock the Adeptus Mechanicus as a pack of techno-shamans, finding the idea of machine worship absolutely ludicrous, yet they literally feed the bodies of their dead into their own version of machine gods. They pride themselves on their conservative and pragmatic view of resources, yet will throw it all away and let countless numbers of their people die, all in the name of a grudge that was started hundreds of years ago by people they have never met. The driving motivator for their entire species is to live a strong life, to make an honored contribution to the ancestor cores. What will they do when that tradition dies? Anyone who is concerned that the Leagues of Votan were not grimdark enough can rest assured knowing that they are in fact grimdark. The future of the Leagues of Votan is uncertain, and without question, they are entering a dark new chapter of existence, a bloody period of fire and war, the likes of which they have never seen. The Great Rift has thrown the galaxy into chaos once again, and set them on a collision course with every other species. But none of this matters. Reality is what the kin make of it. Their empire has persisted for thousands of years, and will continue to endure. By the mysteries of the Crucible are they given form and strength. By the molten fires and pounding pistons of the forge are they armed and armored. By the Votan
well,
and
dwarves
by
are
the
pretty
Fade
ignorant,
are they given wisdom
you know,
and purpose.
in
And
most
by the
cases, what they
searing
believe
wrath
in is
the
kind of
hearth
the
are they
cure-all,
filled with a
right?
fury to overcome
What they
any
believe
foe.
in is just,
the mysteries of the
even if
past,
it's a little
the
like,
uncertainty of the future. The only thing that matters is family, duty, and hearth. Every kin lives by this code, and anyone who gets in their way can die by it just as easily.
Well, I mean, I still don't like that they're clones. That's the biggest thing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with coming up with some headcanon that just works for you, you know? Because it is kind of your own hobby. You can follow the rules, or you could just fucking make whatever you want. I don't love them, but I don't hate them. I'm into them more than I was before, at least. Well, there you go. Now you can give Games Workshop some money. Yeah, they're very hardcore. I mean, again, everything is amped up tenfold in 40K. That's typically how the universe is. It just breeds horde things, because the universe is so horde. That's probably why I don't like 40K as much as I used to. Like, you know, growing up, oh, big battle, crazy, everyone dies, and now I'm just like, man, I'm fucking 30 years old. The dwarves, they know what's up. They got the family, they got the fucking honor, they got, like, the loyalty. Like, I'm 30, dude. Why not do the OG squats and play them as Votan? That they were broken off from the homeworlds and do things different. That's what I was actually going to do. Yes, that's kind of where I was at thematically. The only thing is converting them to make them look like old squats, because you still want them to be recognizable. I don't want to use the old minis. If I do use the old minis, it's most likely just going to be the head, because their bodies are so small. Let me take a look at Google for a sec. Well, they're a 40K version. So, Leagues of Votann conversions. Give me one sec. There's not really much here. Maybe I'm just not really a big fan of 40K anymore. Maybe that's where I kind of stand with this stuff. The whole big, grand, futuristic setting where everyone's depressed just doesn't sound very fun. And I know it's not supposed to be fun, but, like, it's a little bit too unfun for me. Maybe that's where I'm at. I have no idea. Most of these conversions that I'm looking at are very typical of what I expected kind of out of the Leagues of Votann stuff. So, like, people put Caradron heads. People sometimes just don't even use the head. People put, like, Fire Slayer heads on certain characters. You know, there's a guy who's sculpting beards and fur. I've seen his stuff quite a bit. It's fucking amazing. Oh, yeah, for sure there's fun moments, but... Like the Necrons. I personally don't like the Necrons, but I know people do. They love them. That's cool. If I could somehow work out the aesthetic of them, the Votann, just to be different from what they typically look like right now, I could maybe fuck with them, but either way. It is almost, well, it's about 11 o'clock right now. I think it'd be wise to end for me. All the Xenos need better lore. More lore, better lore. I mean, most of the alien races you don't hear much about. Again, if it's from, like, the Imperium's perspective, how would they know more? But, like, we want to know more. It is inspiration, very much so. And inspiration and kind of liking things is very subjective. It's not like everyone's going to like something because you give it to them. Okay, this is a robot, by the way. This is a robot. This is literally the Votann trying to convince me to use bots. It's the corrupted Votann. You need to kind of, yeah, you gotta, like, develop your own aesthetic. I'm just wondering how you do it. How do you make... That's a lot of work. Yeah. What I should do is probably build, like, one single Votann, one Votanner, whatever you want to call him, kin, a Hearthkin, and I should try and, like, throw a bunch of different bits on them just to see what aesthetically works for me. Oh, yeah, well, that's different. I'm sure most people don't do that. Like, it's a very creative hobby, and I think most people who do Warhammer these days don't just power game. Like, you've got competitive people who will probably want to do a bit of that, but they still enjoy the modeling aspect and just making cool stuff. Let me take a look at the GW website. We'll put that on screen. I mean, hey, do whatever, man. I'm just spitting ideas. Hang on. So this would be from Age of Sigmar, Order. Realistically, I think I'd give them Caradron heads. Maybe not. Let's see. I don't think there's other ways to really do it, eh? There's no real dwarven bear heads that are options. Like, the dwarven bear heads don't really exist. Like, dwarf warriors exist, but that would look kind of strange having some weird little, like, lumpy shapen helmet with, like, a perfectly crafted suit. Nah, I'm not going to use any 3D printed stuff, personally. Most likely, I wouldn't do it. No 3D printed. I prefer plastic bits already pre-made because I can chop them up and make them different. 3D printed bits are very brittle. They're not fun to work with. Well, 40k was popular. Warhammer Fantasy wasn't, so what do? You make it a bit more like 40k. Take a look. What are you trying to show me? Where? Where? I don't see any DMs. Oh, I see DMs. Hang on. Those? Nah. I mean, they look good for, like, generic dwarves. No, I'm looking at them. No, I know it's Etsy. They look a little, My problem is I'd probably want to use GW bits just because I'm very familiar with GW. I don't know. I would kind of be okay using their basic heads, just making them with beards, potentially, if I was to go that route. Or again, I'd just use these heads, because these heads are really good. Like, actually really good. They're really good. Yeah. For sure. But again, yeah, dwarven heads typically just don't exist. Even when fantasy comes back, they don't exist. So the Cities of Sigmar stuff... Did they drop them yet? I mean, I know they're in the book, but... No, they're not here. They threw away the dwarves from cities, but, like, we already know confirmation that they're coming back. Some of their heads are really good, though. I don't think all of them are bad. Some of them are awesome. Probably, yeah. I'm trying to like them aesthetically, and I just can't. I think it's because most of their stuff just looks manufactured, which, again, it's 40K. They're technologically advanced, that makes sense. But they all look a little bit too uniform. Yeah, kindness, take it easy, man. I'm going to bed as well soon. Like, I can maybe be here for a few more minutes, and then I'm done. Let's see. I mean, it looks all right. The head's kind of weird. The head's a little bit weird. But the beard looks good. I think it's more so a practical thing. Like, if you're a race living out in space, why the fuck would you have your beards flying out of your suit? You know, that doesn't seem very safe. Not to mention they don't value beards. Beards to them aren't a religion. It's not their way of life. It's like, you know, my beard's longer, you gotta listen to me, beardlings. For these guys, it's like, oi, look at me fucking mustache. I got no beard. I got chops. It's like, yeah, they don't really care. It's not really their thing. Yeah, some of the heads are good, though. Yo, yo. Hmm. They look like little Terran Marines. The silhouette itself, like, I want to love them. I want to love them. Do I have any, like... If I could have the older visor helmets, these guys... Where's this? If I could somehow shave down some of these older Rogue Trader helmets and put them on the squats, I think I'd unironically like them a little bit more. As an aesthetic choice, but even then it's not very individual. It's a very uniform thing. The Caradron stuff might be a little bit too overdone, in a way. The suit itself doesn't really have that level of detail. It's very streamlined. Caradron heads are typically kind of like bristling with detail and whatnot, but... I don't know, man. Tough. I think the first thing I gotta do is go to the garage tomorrow, pull out a single Votan model. Actually, crazily enough, it'll be the one Games Workshop gave me for free for just walking in. And I'll build one single Hearthkin Warrior, and then throw a bunch of random bits on him until I figure out what looks good and what doesn't, and then that's it. I think that's the goal, besides working on Warhammer Fantasy stuff. But yeah, for me, I think we are done here, folks. So I'm going to make my leave. It is very fucking hot in this room. I need some air conditioning. I do some research on Votan conversions. I think it's more so bits. Like, yeah, you can do research. What really inspires me is the original squats and Dwarven iconography. Not so much the streamlined, flat-plated, you know, assembly line, perfect aesthetic. But we'll see. Anyways, that's it for me, folks. I'm out of here. Everyone, take care of yourselves. Be well. Stay safe. Have a great night. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening to me ramble about fake short people. And I'll catch you guys tomorrow. So peace, peace. Take care, folks. Boom.